Welcome to the Final Girls podcast, the only show where we start talking about werewolves and end up on glittery penises. I'm Anna Bogutska, co-founder of the Final Girls Collective and your podcast host. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you've ever listened to the show before, you'll know my undying love for the Canadian teen girl werewolf horror Ginger Snaps, which also coincidentally was released in the year 2000. What a banging year for teen horror. I covered the first film with the great writer and podcaster Alexandra West from the Faculty of Horror Pod on our second series, which was all about female monsters, and I'll link to that episode in the show notes. But we didn't really go into the sequels in that conversation, so this teen horror series was my opportunity to revisit the world of the Fitzgerald sisters, Ginger and Bridget, with the brilliant and brilliantly funny writer and podcaster Becky Dark. Before we dive into our episode this week, a quick reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at TheFinalGhostUK, and as usual, I'd deeply appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. A small comment, I don't need much, but it does mean a lot, and it really helps the algorithm, which helps people discover the show. Please note, as always, all of our discussions are spoiler heavy pretty much from the start, and that includes every film in the Ginger Snaps universe, including the first one. So with all of that said, please enjoy our takes on Ginger Snaps Unleashed and Ginger Snaps Back. Becky, thank you so much for coming on to talk about the Ginger Snaps trilogy. Or rather, should I say that's the second and the third film in the Ginger Snaps trilogy.
Thank you for having me. It's so nice to be back. It seems like ages, so it's delightful to be back.
I know. I can't even recall what was the last episode we did together. I've been so lonesome.
Don't. I can't think. The last time we actually podcasted together was, of course, on stage last October. But in terms of actually, us doing a normal episode, it's been time. So it's nice to be back.
Truly, truly is. So I really wanted to revisit the Ginger Snaps trilogy because we spoke about the first film, Ginger Snaps, as part of the Female Monster series, but it's also so much a teen girl horror as well. So before we get into Ginger Snaps Unleashed and Ginger Snaps Back, what's your relationship with the original film?
I mean, I love it. I think, like so many young women of our generation and below, it looms large in my kind of feminine horror loves. Although saying that, I came to it relatively late. I've only seen it over the last, probably within the last 5 years. So it's not one that I was kind of watching back in the day when I was watching, The Craft and I saw like Jennifer's Body and stuff even before I saw Ginger Snaps. And I don't even really know why. Like, it just kind of passed me by. I love werewolves. I love teen girls. I love, all of this sort of stuff. And I just never quite got around to watching it. And then when I did, it was literally one of those perfect examples of what took me so long. Where has this film been all my life? It's just, I think it's like become really, really iconic, and now is like, of course, just an absolute firm favorite.
Oh, totally. I will, like, even when I recorded the episode with Alex West about the original, I was struggling to remember kind of where I saw it first, because it always seemed to be kind of in my mind, specifically the really grungy, angsty, late 90s vibe of it all. Like the old girl horror film par excellence for me. And the sequel or the franchising of Ginger Snaps becomes so interesting because it's also kind of rare for a film that centers like teen girl werewolves to become, and also a Canadian low budget independent horror film to become a franchise of sorts. So had you seen the second and the third film before we arranged this episode?
No, I hadn't. So I think if anybody's familiar with my watching habits through my podcasting storytelling, my one and done reputation will precede me. So I've always been like, you know, I just watched the first one of a sequel of a franchise or a trilogy or whatever. So I've never done a lot of sequels, and Ginger Snaps is one of the trilogies or franchises that has kind of fallen within that. I've spent the last couple of years really kind of catching up and filling in a lot of gaps of my sequel knowledge. And I think because, as I say, because Ginger Snaps was relatively late coming, like I didn't see it kind of back, you know, when it was first released. I just haven't gotten around to seeing the sequels yet. So when you messaged and asked if I wanted to do 2 and 3 with you for the podcast, it was like the perfect opportunity. And honestly, can't thank you enough. Absolutely loved it.
So this might be a weird question, but based on your love for the first one, did you have any expectations of the sequels? And what did you think of them kind of after you watched them? Did they meet those expectations?
Yeah, I think my expectations were sort of twofold. I think, especially based on, as you say, the first one being really low budget, and what I know of my experiences with some other sequels or franchises of this era. So when they kind of started late 90s and or early noughties and then got a couple of spin-off films, the spin-off films aren't always great quality. And I'm thinking about like maybe the urban legend films. Like I love the first Urban Legend, don't particularly like the 2 follow-ups, right? So I was kind of expecting with Ginger Snaps 2 and 3 for them to maybe follow a similar trajectory as, let's say, the Urban Legend films. But my second expectation, and what I was really actually excited about, is the fact that the 2 leads from the first film come back, which is like super, super unusual, right? Yeah. I mean, even in huge sequels or sequels of larger franchises, it's not all that common to always get those stars coming back, or if they do come back, they quite often get polished off in the, you know, first 15 minutes of the second film or something like that.
Yeah, it's like glorified cameos basically, as opposed to reprising the same roles in depth.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly that. And so knowing that you get the 2 girls, you get Ginger and Bridget coming back for both parts 2 and 3, had me really, really excited because, like, you know, I mean, again, going back to like the kind of iconic comment from earlier, I feel like Ginger and Bridget have become like really iconic in the horror canon of, you know, sort of young female leads, and they're so different and so interesting, and so I was excited to see like them coming back. And then in terms of what my actual experience was watching the films, like, just I'm so delighted. I really, really loved both of them, like, and they're both so different.
Yes.
From each other. And, you know, 3 is definitely so different from 1. And yeah, so I've basically back to them both today in preparation for us talking. I've had the best Friday. I've loved it.
So let's get into, we're primed, we're ready. Let's get into Ginger Snaps Unleashed, which is the direct sequel to Ginger Snaps. So set the scene for us. Kind of, where does this film pick up after Ginger's death in the first one?
So the film basically picks up with Bridget, and she's kind of on the run. So we know that at the end of the first film, she has infected herself with Ginger's blood. So she has got the kind of werewolf now within her. She's killed Ginger, or what was left of Ginger. And in the second film, we basically pick up with her. She is in what looks like a little motel room, and definitely through the credit sequence we learn a little bit about her existence. So she is giving herself the like wolf's bane, the like monk's hood kind of treatment, and she also is like cutting herself and tracking how long her wounds take to heal. So she's kind of tracking like her transformation, like her werewolf transformation through that. And she's also going to a local library and she's obviously kind of doing research and stuff. And close to the beginning of the film, there is an attack from a werewolf, and she gets carted off to a drug rehabilitation clinic, amongst other things we are led to understand. But basically they think she's a junkie because of all of the track marks on her arms and all of her self-harm scars. And, it kind of goes from there with her realizing that she is locked up in an institution with no access to her meds, and her transformation into werewolf starts to escalate.
I mean, wow.
Yeah, right?
What do you think of it as a premise for the sequel?
I think it's clever because it automatically constrains Bridget, right? So she's gone from, you don't spend very long with her, just kind of trying to navigate normal life. But what you do learn is that she seems to be relatively on top of things. You know, we know from the first film that Bridget is really smart and resourceful. And so even though she's not exactly thriving in the first part of the sequel, she does seem to be, handling the situation. And what the premise of the film, as it unfolds, what that does is it constrains her in this clinic and introduces her to a load of new characters who don't know the situation that she's in and who are making like real assumptions about her situation, that they think, I think it's really interesting that they think that they are doing what is best for her and the people around her, but actually they are putting her and everybody else in like mortal danger, because she is very quickly turning into a sort of apex predator.
I mean, it's so interesting. I remember I watched the sequels, kind of binged it almost directly after watching the first one, and I remember them being disappointing. So it was again kind of like coming afresh into these films. And you're right, the premise is so clever because it's kind of has a big challenge. It's like, what do you do with the story of these two teenage sisters when one of them is gone?
Yeah.
And you can't really bring her back. And it's kind of like body horror in reverse, the way I saw it, because it's both like this girl on the run who is so aware of what she might become because she's just gone through all of that with her sister.
Yeah.
That she's kind of harming herself by being completely removed from her body, where it doesn't really register as pain or as harm. It's like she's monitoring herself, like you said. She's trying to control this thing that is controlling her body. So she knows exactly what it is. There is no longer that thing of like that happened in the first film, sort of figuring out what it is, and that metaphor of the teenage, like the teenage body transforming and evolving and all of that. Now this is like an entirely different thing, and it becomes almost like an addiction. And I wonder what you think about because it's used very kind of openly in the film. She's treated like an addict and like a person who is also harming herself. And we know that there is a supernatural reason for that. But the film itself like plays out kind of like a sort of darker Girl Interrupted type film.
Yeah, I was just about to say Girl Interrupted. You're so right. And it is really interesting because especially, what you're saying about the element of control behind it and her trying to sort of monitor and control the situation. Self-harm in like IRL, can often be about, you know, control over one's body. And especially it can affect adolescents when they really feel that life is kind of out of their control and sort of spiraling around them. And this idea of self-harm and then like self-treatment of the resulting wounds is such a play for control, and something that is very much, you know, sort of within their safety zone. You know, this is the one thing that they feel that they have complete control over. And so I think it's a really helpful and smartly utilized metaphor actually in this film. And with the addiction side of things as well, you know, it does in some ways kind of track a similar narrative arc to just addiction films. You know, I'm thinking about, I don't know, stuff like Basketball Diaries and stuff that wasn't out like too long before this, and you know, these adolescent addiction films where you know, they are sort of in denial about it, and then they are, you know, in horrible withdrawal and stuff. And you get some really interesting scenes with Bridget's withdrawal, but it's not played as withdrawal from the substance itself. It is the wolf kind of taking over and her not being able to keep that at bay anymore. So I think it's really smart, and I think it's, I don't know, like it's on the nose in that it's obvious what they're trying to do, but it's not so heavy-handed that it sort of made me roll my eyes. I thought it sort of does it in a really smart, kind of subtle way.
And it gives way for a few very sparing scenes of body horror with Bridget as well. Like I'm thinking of the towards the end of the film when she's injected with wolfsbane and her arm just starts basically bubbling up. And it's fucking grotesque, but it's essentially like a supernatural version of an overdose.
Yeah, it really reminded me of Requiem for a Dream.
Yes! Oh my God.
Or like Jared Leto's horrible, horrific, dreadful, terrible, bad.
No.
But yeah, you're so right. Like that is, yeah, you're right. There are other moments of body horror throughout the film, as there always are with werewolf movies. But that is the moment that I was literally like, oh, you know, sort of turning away from the screen, because the bubbling and like the stuff that's like coming back out of the wound, and is it Travis, the like orderly guy? His reaction is so good because he just goes into full panic. And you know, this shouldn't be happening. Like I've never seen this before. And it really just, you know, he's somebody who has some interesting sort of predilections, and for him to react in that way, I think really kind of, I mean, you can see it in front of you anyway, but his reaction just really drives it home.
And it takes him a while as well to sort of click into, oh no, wait, I'm sort of a medical professional. I know what to do in these situations. Yes, let's take it to a hospital. But I mean, he's just a pure and out scumbag because he's abusing all the girls at the facility, at the institution, by providing them drugs in exchange for sexual favors. So Travis can fuck off and go to hell. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting though. Like, yes, I mean, absolutely. He's horrific and he can fuck off and go to hell. There is absolutely no argument from my side there. But I did, what I liked about him as the kind of movie's douchebag character is he's not a one-dimensional douchebag. He's like a three-dimensional douchebag. And so he's not, it would have been so easy for them to have been a bit more lazy with it and for him to just be giving the girls drugs for sex. But then he sort of, he comes to Bridget and Ghost's aid later and kind of doesn't ask for anything in return at that point. And, you know, he puts in a call to the woman at the clinic to kind of get her to come and help, even though it knows that it's going to get him into trouble. And they start to get you to believe that he has maybe been abusing Ghost as well, which obviously would have been an extra level of horrific action on his part because she is, you know, much younger. And then it turns out actually, no, she was kind of lying about that bit. And so it like I say, no argument. He is the fucking worst, but at least he's like interesting bad rather than just like boring bad.
Yeah, I mean, no, that tracks. That makes sense. And I wanted to kind of ask you as well about Bridget, because whether it's in the first film and even in the third one as well, it's her and Ginger, and they both carry the film, and their relationship is the central like sibling sisterly love story.
Yeah.
Here it's mostly her by herself. So she needs to carry the entire film with occasional kind of hallucinations of Ginger. But what do you make of Emily Perkins in this film, and kind of how she needs to essentially be both her own villain, her own savior, and carry the entire film and the memory of Ginger in herself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a feat. And she's in almost every scene. There really isn't any action that goes on without her. There's a couple of bits where Ghost is off doing something when she's not on the screen, but she really does, as you say, you know, she carries the whole story. And she really is her own savior and her own kind of worst enemy in some respects as well. I think that she does an amazing job at it, and especially following the first film when Ginger is such a charismatic character, and Bridget is much more the kind of she's a bit of a shadow, isn't she?
Yes.
You know, they have an interesting interplay as sisters, with Ginger being, even before the transformation or before she starts getting wolfy, you know, she is very much the kind of, yeah, that sort of, that charismatic, slightly more outgoing one. And Bridget has a lot to do to kind of step up into that leading role, but without just aping it. I think it could have been, again, easy for the film to have leaned into that sort of lusty, animalistic, uber charismatic side of things. And maybe, you know, because Bridget is now infected, that the wolf kind of gives her those characteristics, but it doesn't really. It leans into what makes Bridget in the first film. You know, when we first see her, she is she's still researching, she's in the library, you know, she's looking for the knowledge behind it, she is trying to keep it under control. And yeah, like I say, I just think she does a really brilliant job in kind of making Bridget a bigger character that can then carry the second film through.
And what do you think, the way that you put it, what do you think about when Bridget gets wolfy?
It's interesting because she, again, a little bit like Jennifer Check, Ginger in the first film, there's lots of her just kind of walking down corridors in slow-mo with boys ogling at her, and, you know, her looking extremely sexy. Like, you know, she is such a beautiful, like, just captivating character.
Very stunning character, and also very, like, physically stunning actress who plays her as well, Catherine Isabel.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And so again, it would feel off for Bridget to suddenly sort of transform in a kind of, I don't know, like she's been made over type way. What, again, it actually does is when she starts to become wolfy, is it sort of, it accentuates her. So her eyes go darker. Her, you know, the sort of, in a way,
yeah, her mouth goes
not
all
100%.
Weird.
Yeah, her mouth goes all weird. So it's sort of like muzzles in, you know, it sort of puckers. And I feel like when Ginger transforms, or in her sort of in-betweeny stages, it's almost more feline than canine, but Bridget feels much more sort of canine and sort of darker, you know?
Yeah, like she's almost a black furred wolf. And Ginger's a white fur. Well, she does. When she dies at the end of the first one, she's got white fur. And her hair turns white when she's in the in-between transformation, in between wolfiness. But it's interesting because so much of the film is spent like with Bridget essentially like testing out and harming her body, but we don't really get to see her go wolfy until very, very late in the film. And it's kind of like, I felt like the film was teasing us because that's what we're set up to expect because of the first one. It's like, when's she gonna go wolf? When's she gonna go wolf? When she's gonna eat some motherfuckers? That's what we're here to see. But it isn't. It isn't what we get at all. It's much more psychological and much more, they're different people with very different experiences of the same, let's call it, disease.
Absolutely. And do you think that's because Bridget and Ginger are such different characters in themselves? Do you think that it's because Bridget has seen Ginger kind of go through it already and like knows what to expect? Like, what do you think it is that holds Bridget back?
I think you're right in both instances. I think it's because they're both very different, but also because Bridget didn't get bit in the same way. Like, she didn't have that traumatic, somebody just ran out of the forest and bit me. Yeah. And then trying to figure out what the fuck was going on and why was her body and her hunger transforming so much. Like, was it just puberty or was it something supernatural? So she's already seen all of that and she's seen where it ends. And also she's just a very different type of personality. So I think you're right in that it's kind of both. And also, I think it's different because it's a different team. What's interesting about the behind the scenes of the Ginger Snaps franchise is that every single writer and director of the films was involved in the previous one in some way, but they're not the original screenwriter, Karen Walton, or the original director, John Fawcett. So necessarily, the characters are going in kind of different directions. Like, they have their origin story, but they're going in a completely new route and being scripted and directed by different people with different sensibilities.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I was kind of looking up the team in prep, and like you can see where they've sort of worked together in the past or worked on other stuff together. Obviously, like this Canadian crew where it's all sort of sort of one big pool of people, but you can still feel those sort of individual fingerprints on each three films. I love it.
And what do you think kind of filmmaking style? How does it where does it go differently? Because obviously this is a different director.
Yeah, I mean, so this one feels, it's funny how you were talking about the sort of grunginess of the first one. Like, this one, it feels very 2004 to me. Like the hair and the style of the girls in the clinic, the orderly guy. He's just, he could be played by any number of sort of cookie cutter blonde boys from 2004 who were doing the rounds. The sort of the script and the look of it, like the colors are quite washed out. The screenplay is very sort of sassy and I like that it doesn't have too much kind of like of that like meta sort of knowingness that was so popular sort of in the late 90s and early noughties. But it still has that kind of that just like attitude to it, which I really like. I like that the girls in the clinic all have, their own particular sort of aspect of being, fucked up or whatever. So yeah, it feels different because the first one feels like a high school movie and this one feels like a kind of, I mean, it feels very similar to a lot of films like we've, Girl Interrupted, when you get a load of young women locked up together, medicated or not medicated.
It's
because,
very,
they're all drying out.
Teenage girl psychiatric ward vibes.
100%, yeah.
And on that note, the main kind of new character addition to this is Ghost, played by baby Tatiana Maslany.
Yes!
Adorable! What the fuck? So talented. I forgot how tiny she was in this film. She's a little baby. And she's so good.
Tiny. And it's so interesting putting in a new sister figure for Bridget, but is, she's so much younger. She's got braces and she reads comic books and, we get to learn that she's got her own issues, fine. But, she's such a departure again from Ginger. Yeah. And again, I think it's so lovely that they chose to give Bridget another, like basically a surrogate sister after she's lost Ginger, but have gone, like they've just departed so dramatically from what Ginger's like. I thought that was a really nice touch.
So what do you think of Ghost once we realize who Ghost actually is?
It's great. Like the hints and the way they build it slowly about how you shouldn't necessarily trust this child, whether it be from grandma's sort of darting eyes or her reaching for the panic button while she's all like bandaged up, or the fact that when they turn up to the house, Ghost just firstly that she can drive, secondly that she like knows how to.
She's like fucking 11 years old. What are you doing driving, Ghost?
And like Bridget just doesn't even like question it at all. It just seems to have completely naturally fallen that Ghost is going to be the one driving them away from the clinic.
I mean, I guess if you and your sister are transforming into werewolves, then your bandwidth for acceptable teenage girl behavior has kind of been, expanded. But
Great
still,
point.
It's I find it more weird to see an 11-year-old girl driving a car than I would seeing a teenage girl transforming into a werewolf.
I completely agree. And then you get to the house and she's, siphoning petrol out of the car so she can start the generator, and then she creates that like terrifying booby trap scarecrow thing. Oh my God. So the way that they build this up, and first she tells the lie about the grandma and how the fire started with the Christmas lights, which I really loved. It really reminded me of Gremlins, the really dark Christmas story in Gremlins. And then she's like, ha ha ha, no, I'm joking. She fell asleep with a cigarette. And you're like, I don't know how much I trust this child. How much should I trust this child? And then you find out you shouldn't trust her at all because she's a little psychopath.
With her little psychopathic room that she's completely plastered with cutouts of comic books and like weird drawings and collages of her burned grandmother.
Yeah.
I love Ghost.
She's amazing.
Tiny baby psychopath. Yes.
Yeah, she's so great. And I love that after this film, especially with it being a sequel, after this film basically centering around like werewolves and the horror coming from werewolves, the film ends with it being, oh no, actually the real danger here is this tiny child.
The bad seed! The Canadian bad seed! I love it!
On like grandma getting home and she's got Bridget locked in the basement. I was like, this went somewhere I wasn't expecting it to go, and I am here for it.
It's like, you know what she reminded me of? That final shot of Ghost kind of at her desk doing her little collages. Yeah. Felt very seen, not gonna lie. I did used to do that. Not like lock up werewolves in a basement. I didn't have a basement, but I did used to like do a lot of collaging and crafting. Bit weird, but relatable. Anyway, that final shot reminded me a lot of Mr. Glass from the Shyamalan movies.
Great shout. Yes. So much.
It's like it's same as Mr. Glass. They just want to like write real life comic books.
Mm-hmm.
They want to just manipulate and play around with people like chess pieces so they can create a living comic book story.
Yeah. And also not just create a living story, but I thought it was so chilling, that thing about how like it's played that it's like, oh, it's cute. But actually, when you think about it, that she pulls like where she says that comics send their heroes out into the world like unprepared. And so she basically pulls all the powers from all of the other ones to like make the perfect person or the perfect hero. Like that sounds cute and everything. And then once you realize more about her, like that is all kinds of fucked up.
Little fucking controlling psychopath.
Yes.
I want a whole ass sequel about Ghost.
Yes.
I want to see her when she grows up. I want to see her with, Ginger on a leash. Not Ginger, sorry, Bridget, because Ginger's dead. Bridget leashed. I was like, what? Because we essentially, and we should talk about the next film, but this, which is a sort of a prequel and it's set in the past. So this, once you've watched all 3 movies, is effectively the end of Ginger and Bridget's story.
Exactly. So Bridget just ends up in the basement. Yeah. What happens next, Anna? We need the movie where Tatiana Maslany comes back and like plays adult Ghost. And yeah, like you say, she's just got like Bridget like a poodle on a leash.
I mean, okay, wait. Let me pitch you something. Also, Tatiana Maslany, not even low-key, absolutely, genuinely one of the most talented actresses of her generation.
Oh, unbelievable. Her work on Orphan Black
is my God,
mind-blowing.
It is genuinely mind-blowing. And like the fact that it was so it was recognized, but not as recognized as it should have been. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Fuck Jared Leto and his nominations. Nominate Tatiana Maslany all over again in retrospect for a show that ended quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
Reparations must be made for Tatiana Maslany. But my point being, what if they do come back, they do join forces again, and it's an adult Ghost played by now adult, hyper-talented Tatiana Maslany, and she's forced, Bridget, to have werewolf puppies because she wants more werewolves so she can go more powerful.
And that works so perfectly because you get the moment in this film where she's like, she says to Bridget, why didn't he kill you? And Bridget says, he doesn't want to kill me. He wants to mate with me. And so it's already planted that seed. Oh my God, it's seamless.
People, just commission Becky Dark and myself to write this sequel. I know there's a series. People. Fund us. What should the name be? We'll come up with it later. All I can think about is just ghost puns right now, and it is not the time.
Ginger snaps for ghost puppies.
Like Ghost Protocol? Oh my goodness. So I also just realized, for shame on me, the fact that Ginger snaps unleashed is a cruel joke because she ends up literally kind of on a leash.
God, how have I literally only just realised that?
I've only just realised this myself too.
They must have been so proud of that just for you and I to have completely glossed over that phenomenal pun.
I think, do you know what? I've never seen anyone else comment on it. I might be wrong. I've read a lot about the Ginger Snaps films, but probably not everything. But if anybody else says, maybe it's a first that we've noticed
Unleashed. That is props.
So let's move on now to Ginger Snaps Back, the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
This is a prequel to the first film. So what does this one add, or how does it change the story of the Fitzgerald sisters?
So this film basically walked so Fear Street 1666 could run, right? I mean, this did it so long ago.
Snapped.
Like so long ago. I was like, wait a minute.
Wow. I hadn't even made that connection. You're so right. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
So, I mean, what does it add? Basically, it gives us a bit more, mythology in a way about werewolves in America.
Canada.
And it also, Canada, sorry, my God. It gives us a bit more about werewolves in Canada. And it also builds on this really central theme of Bridget and Ginger and their kind of undying, unbreakable bond. And that, we're sort of introduced to it in voiceover right at the top of the film. And I think it's Ginger's voiceover saying that they are two sisters bound by blood, and that they will be together forever. And the film, basically, it's Ginger and Bridget as we know them. They've got the same names. It's in 1815.
Yeah.
So back, quite near the start of. I mean, my Canadian history isn't great, but it's kind of trader forts and all that kind of thing. It's way back at the start. And I think they make a couple of comments about how the fort that the film is based in is the furthest that man has kind of got, all of the white man has kind of got that far. So if they push any further in that direction, they're sort of going into uncharted territory. And you get this idea that they've sort of already they've pushed too far, and you get a lot of interaction with the indigenous people, and they also towards the end of the film start to sprinkle in some kind of folklore about Wendigos, which I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit disappointed about, because whenever you get indigenous people from the Americas, from the now Americas, in horror films, it's always the Wendigo. And so I was like, I'm pretty sure they have other folklore guys, but anyway, fine. And then I was like, okay, this is actually really interesting, because we've got native characters alongside white characters. They are just victims of the wolves, as the white characters are. They are also victims of white intolerance. This is really interesting, actually. And then towards the end they were like, oh, it's the Wendigo. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. Of course it is, so I thought that was a bit of a shame. But other than that, there's some really interesting stuff, and I was very pleasantly surprised just in the quality of this film. The performances are really good, and some of the cinematography and stuff is really good. And this is what I mean when I say, especially this one, I think is better than it has any right to be as a third installment of sort of early noughties.
Yeah, this is
trilogy.
2004.
Yeah. So, because this and 2 were 2004, right? So did they just film them back to back? Do you know what?
I think I don't think they filmed them back to back. Actually, maybe they did. Wait. Did they? I think they might have, because they're both 2004,
both the
you're right.
dates are 2004, but I don't know what the filming schedule was like. But yeah, I mean, it's just, for the second sequel in a trilogy, it's just, it was really good, Anna.
I mean, it kind of, okay, so it does feel very of its time, but it also oddly, I don't know if you got the sense, feels very Euro horror, which I think is weird to say because it's Canadian. So if anything, it's camouflages as an American production, but it isn't. And I think it's important to separate the Canadianness of it all, because, it's the pride and joy of Canadian horror, ginger snaps. But
absolutely, and so it should be. And you get so much, in both of these films, actually, those kind of, the snowy
Yes.
settings like really play into the feel of the film. So it is important. It is important that it's pointed out that these are Canadian.
So the thing that it reminded me of was these films like Brotherhood of the Wolf, which is like a French werewolf film, kind of from the mid-early noughties as well.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of like period, but kind of anachronistic period piece where it's horror, but the horror is really condensed and really dark and kind of very physical, but kind of trying to be classy as well. Like it tries so hard to build up this massive mythology, kind of go to the root of their lycanthropy. And it kind of, I think it works. It's a radically different film from the other two, like radically different.
Radically different, yeah.
And because of that, like I just kind of think of it as almost a different type of story because it feels so much of its time, but also of a completely different sensibility in a weird way.
Yeah.
And I think what adds to that weirdness is the fact that, I don't know if you got the sense, you tell me, that Bridget and Ginger, so Emily Perkins and Catherine Isabel, their characters in this one are named exactly the same. They're Bridget and Ginger Fitzgerald, but they're also acting in very much the same way as they had in the first film. Their dynamic between each other, the way they speak. There's even one point, I think, where Ginger says, "This is fucked." And I'm like, it's 1815, sis? What?
Yeah. Yeah. When you said anachronistic, the first thing that sprung to mind for me was the language. Like, absolutely. The way that especially Ginger talks.
And like, what did you make of that? Well, I think it's a choice. Like, what do you make of that choice of making them sort of very much feel out of time?
Yeah, I completely agree that it's a choice. I don't think it's that, they messed up and that, they didn't know what people would have actually spoken like in those days. I think it is a choice. And I think it worked for me. I liked that anchored it in the characters. And so, like, okay, so if we do take Fear Street 1666 as an example, where you've got, the same teenage characters suddenly supplanted to sort of oldie-timey storylines, in that they were given different accents, their characters were given different names, some of their characteristics may have been similar, but it definitely wasn't the same characters. And I think by using speech and language the way that they do, by giving them the same names, by giving them the same sort of dynamic and acting style, I think it just roots it and shows us in a nice shorthand way that, these are the same girls that we have come to know and love and fear, and that it kind of makes that through line, I suppose, for this central premise of their blood bond and being together forever. It just makes it so much like stronger and clearer in this really shorthand way. So for me, I didn't find it sort of brought me out at all. I was along for the ride.
And did you find, because it kind of essentially mimics the story of the first film, but in a completely different setting, kind of, did that element work for you? And like, did the ending work for you, which is essentially the same ending as the first one?
Yeah, I'm really interested to talk to you about the ending because I'm not sure that I'm clear on what happened. So I really want you to tell me what happened. But
I'll try.
Yes, it did in terms of that kind of mirroring of structure and the story. It was kind of different enough, and the setting was different enough. And the interplay with, the men in the fort, especially the kind of the misogynist priest, I thought he was really interesting. And then the introduction of the kind of sub storyline of basically, the white invasion, and then the knock on of white men fathering children with native women. And I think having Jeffrey, the little boy, again, adding in this more sort of childlike character like they do with Ghost in the second one, like it just added so much kind of, I don't know, like for me, an extra level of like pathos to it when you like, especially the makeup on that kid is so horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, his dad has kind of, he won't admit to people that he's dead and that he's got him kind of locked up and hidden away. All of that just added like an extra little kind of like frisson to it, I suppose. Especially when you weave into it all of the complications around kind of like racial heritage and stuff. So yeah, like it was I was happy to just follow these girls again on a similar journey, but I thought all of the extra elements that they added in just sort of helped it not feel like it was a straight repeat.
No, it didn't feel like a straight repeat, but I do wonder, like, what the ending meant. Because there's something that they say at the end, like the day of reckoning, or the day the cure grew stronger. I'm like, but what is the cure? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Isn't it like the infection more like the cure? Or is the cure to their lycanthropy kind of their blood? Like, it just felt like a little bit like an open door for a continuation that has not happened.
That hasn't happened. Yeah, I agree. And in fact, because obviously I hadn't seen 2 and 3, I actually, when it finished, I immediately looked up, like, is there a 4th? Is that, you know, do I just not know about it? And it does leave it open. And I wasn't even 100% sure, and this is what I really wanted to check with you about, whether Bridget was infected by the end of the film. Is that what happens when they kind of clasp hands? Okay,
yeah,
fine.
Their blood mixes, which is the same thing she does at the end of the first one, right? It's sort of a way to demonstrate her love for her sister, right? It's the fact that we will carry the same disease, you know, our blood will be the same, and if it means that it's infected with werewolf illness, then it's infected for the both of us.
Yeah.
But the thing that is, I think, slightly confusing, and perhaps because it was trying to set up...
Hi, Vlad.
Hello, sir. Shush. Oh my god, I'm so sorry.
Don't you dare apologize for him.
I think perhaps because I was trying to leave the door open for a potentially 4th film.
Yeah.
It's like, what is their lineage? I think it's trying to set up something about their lineage and their blood, how like either the story is destined to repeat itself because it's been prophesized, because one of the hunter in the film says that he's been dreaming of Bridget, and they kind of go against the indication that the seer gives them of like, you should kill the boy so that your family does not carry this curse. And does that mean, going back to the first one, that they were always destined to be infected and to become werewolves? Because
exactly.
Because who bites Bridget is never who bites Ginger in the first one is never explained or elaborated on. It's a completely random attack.
And what it made me wonder was if it's almost like Raw, where it is literally like passed down like through the female line of the family. You know, is it genetic, or is it it's sort of supernatural in a kind of, you know, fate, inevitability type way,
like an inescapable fate. Like, this is a genetic, say, like disease or condition, and you will eventually get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yes, I mean, those were all questions that I definitely had coming away from it. Because
there is a point in the first film, where their mom, Mimi Rogers, kind of, there are hints. It's never fully explicitly explained, but it's hinted that she knows what's going on with Ginger.
Yeah, it is.
So perhaps it's that. Which would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is quite oblique.
Ambiguous.
It's not very direct. It's not saying this is how it works. It's very much, like the whole thing about the red and the black because of the hair, like sisters united in blood together forever. It's the same stuff say in the first film, but it's more like a bond. But this makes it feel or seem like fate.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with all of so much talk about blood and that the blood bond, it really is almost sort of having its cake and eating it, between the sort of fate and genetics thing, where it's like there's kind of people having supernatural dreams and, this is our destiny, but also driving it home that it's like in their blood and they've got this blood bond and that's going to go down through the generations. So, yeah. I loved, though, saying that, the moment when I thought the whole kind of finale with Ginger coming to get Bridget. So she's gone out and Bridget counting to 100 like she does at the beginning of the film. Ginger coming back, fighting the guys and them trying to burn Bridget while she's still waiting for Ginger to come and get her, all of that. And it was filmed really beautifully, all of the kind of fire effects and everything looks really amazing. There's an incredible shot when Ginger opens the gates and the camera kind of swoops up above her, this amazing down shot of her opening the gates and then the wolves coming in on either side of her. So all of that I thought was brilliant. And then it just all led up to that moment when you're led to believe because of these ritualistic dreams and the kind of classic, because she's been hanging out with indigenous people, so of course she has to go on a spirit journey. The idea that she has to stab Ginger and that she's going to kill Ginger, and then that moment where she's she says together forever and then turns around and kills the guy instead. I was literally yeah, I was it just the build up to it and then just the execution of that moment just really, I was all in.
And to start wrapping up our chat about these films, Becky, one of the things that I find very curious about this trilogy as a whole is that the sisters remain basically the same age. They're always teen girls.
Yeah.
So where do you think that this whole Ginger Snaps trilogy stands within teen horror as its own subgenre?
Yeah, I guess because so obviously they're high school in the first one, and then in the second one I get the impression that even though the film is released 4 years later, not that much time can have passed because Bridget is still sort of on top of the wolfiness, right?
Yeah.
And then in the third one, they're the same age, but it's back in time, so they're different people.
Old-timey teenagers.
Old-timey teenagers. So, I mean, I think this is I think it's a key text, Anna, in the kind of teen horror subgenre, because, and in fact, I am, so in 2000 when the first one came out, I turned 18, and so maybe that is why actually I didn't see it at the time, because films like The Craft were out those just couple of years earlier when I was sort of 14, 15, 16, and maybe at 18, a sort of a teen werewolf thing just wasn't sort of on my radar as much as it would have been a couple of years earlier. And I'm actually, I sort of lament that slightly. I think that if I'd had access to this when I was, just entering adolescence, because of the sorts of issues that it deals with through the werewolf lens, whether that be periods, hormones, drug use, suicidal thoughts, mental health, misogyny, all of that is explored through the trilogy. I can see why it would be such a kind of, I don't know, like a heady and like really sort of important and informative group of films to watch when you're that age. So yeah, I mean, I've discovered them slightly late, really, in terms of my sort of age, but I can see why. And I think today, like, I mean, I would definitely recommend this for younger teens, because I do think that it deals with all of that stuff, even though the style might be a little dated. The messages are still really important.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because it has been announced that there's a new series on development based on Ginger Snaps.
Yes.
More wolfy shit. What do you think a new version of the Fitzgerald sisters story could potentially bring? I mean, nothing's been announced. We just know that it's in development and kind of who's attached to write it and stuff. But what do you think could it potentially bring to the table now in this new era of feminine horror?
Such a good question, and I'm never good at these sorts of predictions. But I mean, I would assume, especially off the back of series like Chucky, for example, that there would be a much more sort of diverse and representative set of characters, and I would hope that as well. I would love to see more, say it's set in high school, for example, like, or I think Chucky's even junior school, isn't it? Because the kids are really young in that. But I would love to see, some LGBTQ characters, and some characters from, different racial backgrounds. And I do think that werewolves specifically, I mean, even if you go back to, Oz in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, again, that was used and has been used in so many different properties to explore those. Because when you're a teenager, you are literally transforming, your body is transforming, and you're sprouting hair, and you're getting feelings that you don't understand, and, you're lusty for someone one moment, and the next moment you're biting their head off. Like, all of this stuff is just so perfectly in line with all of the tropes that come along with werewolves. So what I would hope is that they take all that tropey stuff, and use it to tell teen stories like they need to be told in 2022.
I think that's really, really pointed, and there's something you mentioned when we were talking about Ginger Snaps Unleashed, of this idea of control and how desperately Bridget wanted to control this thing that she knew was kind of inevitable, and she wanted to control it via science. And that's such a key thing for teenagers as well. You're right, like this, bodily changes, hormonal changes, emotional changes, kind of trying to figure out who you might potentially become as an adult, and kind of the pressure as well of making choices that will affect the rest of your life when you don't know what the fuck is going on or what you want to do. Yeah. Like, there is this theme that's so explored in the second film, I think. So, kind of so much better than in the first one, because the first one is so much about unbridled like rage and teen angst and anger and hunger and appetites and all that stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, if there was a way to combining those two kind of core push and pull things of being a teenager, of like so many people expecting and demanding so much of you, your body and your mind going through so many different changes, and you in the middle as a like little human being trying to form itself into some sort of like person, trying to keep control of yourself, of what's going on, of what everyone else around you wants and demands from you. Like, and sometimes that manifests in really destructive or self-destructive behaviors. I'm basically thinking, like, what would it look like if it was Ginger Snaps meets Euphoria?
Oh, amazing. I tell you what, I wouldn't be a teen again for £1,000,000. You could not get me anywhere near it.
Oh my God, a teenager in 2022? Absolutely fuck that. Nope.
Horrendous.
No. I am in awe of teenagers who like are thriving and surviving right now. I'm like, babes, I'm barely managing. And I'm like, you're 15 and have the pressure of the entire fucking world on your shoulders, and also social media and the internet. Bless the internet, but no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like,
no, we need some werewolves to come along and give these kids some guidance.
I'd rather be a teenager like in the 90s or in the 70s rather than be a teenager now.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
I've seen Euphoria. I don't want anything close to that. Absolutely not. Unsubscribe.
I'd rather be a werewolf than a teenager. I think that's what I'm realizing.
I'd rather be a werewolf any day of the week. Actually, I'd rather be a vampire. If I can pick my monsters, I'd rather be a vampire. If I was a vampire teenager, though, I would love that.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
In fact, I think we've already had that conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, like, a Papa Gory vampire, none of that, like, Twilight bullshit. I mean,
No.
I mean, like, Euphoria, but make it vampires. Glitter, but in a different way.
Yet again, funders, please, send us money. Let us write these things.
I mean, Twilight meets Euphoria basically means glittery penises.
Yeah. Do I want that? I'm not sure I want that.
I'm willing to explore.
I love that it was like, I'm not sure if I want glittery penises, and you were like, I'm willing to explore, and then the doorbell went. It was like,
it's my glittery penis delivery, Becky. I've already ordered it.
My Friday night's just starting.
Exactly that. So, on that note, I must go and attend to a glittery penis. So,
yes.
Becky Dark, thank you so much for this conversation. Anna. It's been a joy.
It has, as always, been a joy.
And for anyone who wants to follow and read and listen to more of your work, where can people find you online?
Oh, thank you. The best place is on Twitter. Everything goes on there. I am at Bunny Dark. And I also have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/Bunny Dark, where if you want to throw me a couple of quid to support my work, you can do it there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anna. Chat soon.